So, is there a power move you make every morning or maybe every day to make yourself feel great?
Actually, I have a new one. I change it up, but I have Alexa in my kitchen. She stands at the ready. She's ready for action. And every morning I have my egg, my slice of toast, and my coffee. And then I play Beyoncé singing Pure Honey. It's one of her new songs. And I put it up super loud. My neighbors probably think that there's some sort of issue going on in the apartment, that I played the same song. It's like my OCD, that every day at 8:42 I'm playing Beyonce really loud. And I just play it once. I dance around our little studio apartment in the city, waiting for my egg to be ready. And as soon as that's over, I can start my day. That is the only exercise I get. That and trying on clothes and Bloomingdale's is playing Beyonce, or one of my, like Bruno Mars or whomever I really like listening to, or Riri. I like listening to a little Rihanna, and then I'm ready to go.
Ooh, that's a good power move.
Yeah.
So I think of you as the queen of reinvention. You want to talk about that? How many reinventions have you done?
I've had a few lives. I'm like a cat who keeps falling off the roof, and I somehow get that like chip nail polish back on. So my first career, I wanted to be a dancer. Not successful because I wasn't really that great, but I got close to almost getting really big jobs like a chorus line and shows like that, but not quite good enough. So then I pivoted, literally, no pun intended, and then I became a talent agent, which I loved because I love actors and performers, and I thought, well, there's that old slogan, if you can't do, you teach. Well, for me, it was I couldn't do, so I might as well help other people do it better. Right. So, and I did that for probably 20 years, and I loved it. And while I was doing that, I raised a family. I had 3 kids. I was married, got divorced, found a second husband. This is all a lot of work, but it was all worth it. It's like all building the foundation for happiness is getting the right husband, getting the kids to be okay. Thank God they all worked out. And then after that, I took some time off to watch them get through high school and go to college, and I could pretend I was a helicopter, I think that's the expression, parent, even though I really wasn't. I was just a nosy parent who asked a lot of questions. And then after I did all that, I decided I wanted to go back to my true love, which was performing, certainly not as a dancer, because when I wake up in the morning, I can barely lift my shoulders. I don't know it always feels like something might have broken in my sleep. But I also had wanted to be a comedian when I actually studied comedy at NYU. I paid all that money to go to NYU to study how to be an asshole on stage. So I did that. So I decided, no, I really want to get back to performing and also writing. I was thinking of writing sort of a memoir, but I wasn't really great at grammar, and I thought, well, I don't really know if I want anyone to read all my words that don't have the right, paragraphs and punctuation. So I'll just tell people about myself. And I had gone to see a Moth StorySLAM, and I was so intrigued by all these real people telling real stories about their lives. And I thought, that I could do. I can tell people the story of my life. I can tell about what an idiot I am, and I can share all the stupid shit I've done my whole life, and enjoy doing that and entertain people. Only it doesn't have to be like a long form. It doesn't have to be a 2-hour solo show. It could be in 10 minutes.
Wait a minute, how old were you when you made this shift?
I started actively performing when I was 58, turning 59.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was always the oldest one in the room. I was older than my other fellow performers' mothers, which I took great pride in because I thought I looked just as good, delusional as they might be, as their children. And it just gave me so much happiness.
So I'm going to give you a decade, and I'm going to ask you for a description of your sex life in that decade. 20s.
Oh, God, I'd say Caligula. I don't know if your audience knows Caligula, but Caligula.
30s.
Breeder.
40s.
Change.
50s.
Dry spell.
60s.
Joyfully quiet. Joyfully quiet.
What will the future bring?
Oh, gosh. I'm hoping a continued life of joyful quiet, because I don't have the energy to put on a thong.
There's a lot of talk of longevity these days and hitting 100. What's your thought about that?
Oh, God. I don't want to live that long, frankly. It sounds like too much work. I really don't want to be in a wheelchair facing a wall with like applesauce on my tray.
No.
I'm not interested. I want to live as long as I can be mobile and happy. And when I say mobile, I don't mean necessarily on foot. I mean, I can be in a chair, but I want to be able to converse with my family without them having to give me a chalkboard. I don't want to have to wear, my mother used to wear what I call the disco bib when she'd go to dinner when she was in her later stage years, where she would have like foodstuffs on her. I don't want to wear a bib.
No.
I want to go gracefully. I'm happy to live as long as I can, but 100 seems like way too much work.
With you.
Yeah, I don't need to have anyone from Smucker's wishing me a happy birthday on the Today Show.
How do you feel about Joan Rivers?
I always was a fan of Joan Rivers. When I was a kid, I was fascinated by her. She was probably the first person I saw on stage on the Ed Sullivan Show or sitting at Johnny Carson's desk. And that made me feel like there are real people who tell really funny stories that have nothing to do with being glamorous, really, or being beautiful. And I just related to her, and I related to all of her ridiculousness. And there was a time when she got much older when I don't know if I related to her quite as much. I thought maybe she was a little bit too mean-spirited, like Kathy Griffin at the award shows or whatever, even though I'm a huge Kathy Griffin fan.
Love.
But there was a certain period where I didn't know if it was really right. But I look back now, I reflect on who Joan Rivers was, and she really set the tone for women, and she was a groundbreaker.
Yeah.
And she's definitely, that's a broad. That was one of the great broads.
Yes, I saw this little clip the other day of Whoopi and of Joan having a conversation about looks. And Whoopi said, can't you let go of wanting to be thin and blonde? And she said, no, I can never.
Right.
That was very interesting.
I'll tell you something. I found it really interesting. I saw Joan at sort of the end of her life. She was playing at a very small theater in Westchester. It was in a downstairs room, and it wasn't like the kind of room you would expect her to be in because it was so small, and there was probably only 75 people in that room. And it was like like a comedy hour that she was doing, which kind of surprised me. And she was fully dressed like as if she were at the Tropicana in Vegas or at the Wynn, fully made up, eyelashes, everything. And I thought, no, she is convicted to this. This is who she is. It's like Dolly Parton. She knows who she is. You don't have to like it, but she owns it. And I'm so impressed with that. I mean, she's another broad. She's brilliant and gorgeous and never gave a rip what anybody thought when she came out in her crazy outfits.
It's true.
It's like one of my biggest heroes, my favorite broads, is Miss Piggy.
Ah, me too. Now I'm with
her.
you.
I love Miss Piggy. I mean, this is a woman after my own heart. I love her.
Me too. That is some broad. I love
Even
that.
if she's not a woman, I still love her.
So, have you ever settled in life? What's your thought about settling?
Oh yeah, I've settled a lot. I mean, I've learned from settling that it's really not something anyone. The only thing that should settle is dust. Nobody should be settling. But when I was much younger, I settled and became engaged to a young guy, this guy Jeff, who I never married. And the only reason we got engaged was because I was transitioning from being a dancer to a working person, and I was so concerned that I would never have any money and I would never be like solid. I wouldn't be on solid footing because I came from a kind of poor family, and I was so worried about living in an empty refrigerator box on the corner somewhere. So I settled by getting engaged to a guy that could provide for me. And big mistake. I do not recommend that to anybody. There isn't enough money in the world to settle on any man or woman for a long-term relationship. It does not end well.
Oof. So you did marry him?
Oh, I never married him.
Oh.
I left him about 3 weeks before the wedding. And to get back at me, he basically stole all the money out of our joint wedding account that was from engagement gifts, and he stole all the gifts. That was sort of his payback. And I thought I dodged a bullet because there are not enough crystal decanters in the world. important enough to marry this kind of person. And I don't know whatever happened to him, but I hope he's happy. But that would have been major settling. So,
Bye-bye.
And I'm sure I've settled for certain jobs over my career before I finally landed on what I wanted to do. I took a lot of jobs. Like, I remember I used to spray people with perfume on the main floor at department stores and have them tell me wish I could get hung from a ceiling lamp because they were so angry that I was spraying them with perfume. God. I mean, they were so specific about how they wanted to kill me. So, I would do things like that, or I sang telegrams, and, which was really, if I think about it now, is mind-numbing, because I would sing telegrams to, like, men's 30th birthday parties, but they were like bankers, and they'd make me dress up like a Playboy bunny, and I'd be like, have to crawl on some conference room table. It was really, I would have made so much more money if I were really like a stripper or dancing for money, rather than having to sing a fakakta song and get $100 for my trouble. Not worth it. That was settling. So yeah, I've learned from a lot of that stuff. I haven't settled in years.
Yes.
I'm proud to say.
Yes. So what do you do if that inner critic starts popping up on you?
Tequila? Let me think. Well, usually tequila, but if not tequila, I will ask my husband a specific direct question involving whatever it is that's making me feel terrible about myself. And he'll just look at me and I'll reset, because I'll know, okay, this is dysfunctional thinking. I don't have a therapist right now, but when I did have one, she would explain, okay, dysfunctional thinking. Like, you never use words like you never do X, like that's dysfunctional thinking. Well, I learned the hard way that if you can beat yourself up about things, but you're only punishing yourself. There's no point in it.
Yes.
And it's just needless. So, and I also learned that you can worry about the stupidest minutia that you will not remember you worried about it even 24 hours later. So just let go, be kind to yourself, let go, because it's not going to matter in a day or two. I tell my kids that all the time. Do not dwell, because you will forget what it was you were dwelling on 2 days later. Why give yourself a rash? Don't do it. It's not worth it.
Do they listen?
I hope so. I don't know that they do, because I know when I was 34 years old, it was hard to hear it. Because if I wanted to sit in whatever that stew was, that disappointed stew, it was very hard for somebody to ladle me out. But now I have more of a long view. I can see a bigger picture. It's almost like I can really zoom out now and see all of the things that I've accomplished, and all the times I worried about those things that I did actually accomplish that I shouldn't have worried so much about.
Right. Libido these days.
It's not as great as it had been when I was crazy in my 20s, 30s, probably 40s. But I'm more in love, I think, and in tune with my body and my husband and our closeness than it has to do with actually, the sexual aspect of it. We have such a closeness that seems to fulfill, what we both need. So it's not something I think about a lot. I just feel like our life is kind of beautiful the way it is in our closeness.
Yes.
And closeness doesn't necessarily mean having sex all the time, like it did when we first got married. It's not like I'm always thinking about what new exciting place can you jump somebody's bones. Now I'm worried about if he jumped my bones, would they stay intact? So it's just not something I really think about that much.
Do you enjoy, I know you've been married twice, did you enjoy your solo single life in between?
It was short because I had 3 kids at the time, under the age of 8 when I got divorced, and I was exhausted, as you can imagine. But I dated very few men, and I told my friends, if you're going to set me up with a guy, because that's how, we didn't have Hinge or J-Date back then. It was 1997 or 98. I said, he has to be so valuable that you'd want him to run a small country. I want a guy who everybody would want to be married to because he's perfection, nothing less. Because I wanted to be with my children. I didn't really want to go on needless, I didn't want to chase my tail on dates with guys that weren't going to work out. So I met my husband pretty much after about 6 months of being single on a blind date. And I just knew right away on our first date, this was it. I was done for. And God bless him. I don't know, I'm the only woman I know who had the good fortune to meet a lovely Jewish dentist who had no children.
Really?
I mean, that's the trifecta. So, and he had been married, so he knew what it was like to have a wife. And I thought, oh gosh, this is too good to be true. But we've been together 25 years, so
wow.
It worked out.
Yes. I mean, when I think, you see, I'm solo with no kids. I've been married, whatever that. But you had 3 kids.
Yes,
That's
and my
not
youngest was only 4 years old at the time.
Ah, that must have been some naughty first husband,
It
but
was,
we won't go into that.
Yeah. Well, I'm actually very close with my first husband.
Oh,
now.
nice.
Yeah, well, because he's my kid's dad. So,
Yes.
you know, in life, we make a lot of what we think are mistakes.
Yeah.
But to me, nothing is a mistake.
Yes.
Because if I didn't have that first marriage, I wouldn't have my children. So,
Yeah.
as much as we didn't get along, we made great babies. So,
Yes.
I'm totally grateful, still am, to my first husband. And every mistake is really an opportunity to do something better the second time.
That's true.
Or the third, you know, or the fourth. You just brush yourself off and kind of figure it out.
Friendships. Do you have a lot of women friendships?
Yes, I do. I have some seriously great women friends. Some that I've had for 25, 30 years, some
Wow.
much newer. But I love my women, the women in my life. They're
Do you
all
have-
fabulous.
Do you have men friends?
I have a couple male friends, very good male friends. But it's mostly the women that,
Yeah.
you know, the ones that every day, we text each other 12 times about some
nice.
nonsense, or we send each other stupid Instagram posts or whatever. And I have like 2 or 3 really good male friends who I just don't see as often for one reason or another.
And they're straight.
Sorry?
And they're actually straight, some of them?
No.
No.
No, they're all gay.
Oh, see? Me too.
All gay. I mean, I love straight men. Obviously, I married one, but most of my good male friends are not straight.
Yeah, me
They're
too.
gay.
So if you had an opportunity to be, let's say, 25 again, and knowing what you know now, what would you change?
Well, I would change the way I think, because if I had only realized then who I am now and that I belong in any room, I wouldn't walk into rooms as an apology. And I think that's a really great lesson to teach young people, is that when you walk into a room, either for a job interview or an audition, as I used to tell actors, or into a social setting, when you walk into that room, you're bringing something to that room. You're not asking for forgiveness for showing up. And I was one of these people who had so much insecurity, I thought I was such an imposter, as so many people did. I thought that my good fortune at work, because I had a pretty successful agency with my partners, I thought that was just pure luck. I thought that, you know, when people would compliment me on whatever I was doing, I'd say I'm just slightly above average.
Wow.
You know, these are the kind of things that we've all been programmed with, we've believed. And now, like, I have this wonderful party trick that I tell people. When I go to any kind of engagement or party, and very often I go by myself because my poor husband works crazy hours. I don't make him come with me to these parties. And usually the room is filled with very young, very hip, gorgeous people, you know, somewhere downtown in Soho. And I'm nervous because I'm insecure not to walk into a room thinking I don't know anyone. But I learned this little trick, which is when you go to a party, you pretend, you fantasize before you walk in the room that you're actually very famous or important. And you're so famous, important, that if people are not coming over to talk to you right away, it's because they're too embarrassed or nervous or overwhelmed by your presence. So you should go to them and introduce yourself and put out a hand and offer for a shake and say, hi. And I'll say, I'm Sandi Marx, what's your name? And in my mind, I'm willing myself to believe I'm Angelina Jolie or Jen Aniston or somebody who people really would be excited to have show up. And because it's all up here, it's all in our brains that we think that other people have an agenda about how they feel about us. They're not thinking about you. You have to put yourself out there so they can have that conversation with you. And it works every time. And you have a lot more fun if you're not worrying about how you're being perceived. And instead, you just kind of enjoy other people and learn about them. I think really what happened for me when I was around 57, 58 is I had this concern or fear that outside of my immediate family, I would become invisible, or people wouldn't know really who I am unless they were good friends or family. And there was so much I wanted to share because I had distance from so many of my career, you know, mishaps or joys or incredible follies that I had been through in my life. And because I was having trouble settling down and actually writing it in a book, and I thought, who wants to read another book? I wanted to just tell a lot of people at once, and it's very hard to gather people on the corner of Christopher Street to hear your story. And I thought, what can I do to actually make myself feel heard, in a way that wasn't complaining, because we all have the responsibility to be heard by what we have to say. And I thought, well, I can organize my thoughts in a way that are entertaining. So I started taking a lot of writing workshops. And I noticed in the writing workshops, one specifically at the 92nd Street Y, where my favorite part of the workshop was when we had to get up and read out loud our work. And that's when my words would come to life. And I realized at that point, like, oh, there's something here, because I have these 12 people in this room that are paying attention to what I have to say. And it was like a drug. It was like, I need more of that. Whatever that is, I want more of that. How can I manifest this into something bigger? And that's when I started realizing that I just have to throw myself into the deep end of the pool and stop, having a million reasons why, there's nothing interesting or I have nothing to say. Like, yes, I have something to say. Yes, it's interesting. And I know that if I can get up and do it, I can prove that I have something worthy to share, if not for them, then for myself, because I didn't want to be invisible. I wanted to be seen as I got older. And I continue to know that women, over 60 are really interesting because they've been through a lot. And I've had an incredible life. I mean, how many women do you know were hired to be Pat Benatar's ass double? I mean, I've been in parades. I was a professional cheerleader for the New York Cosmos soccer team when I was hired by Pele. I mean, this is an unusual life. So I just thought I couldn't not. It was almost like I had no choice, but I had to tell it. And I found a medium that worked, in bite sizes. And I wouldn't have done it if I thought it would, just completely, I'd fall on my face. I kind of did some road testing in workshops, but then I realized, no, this is working out. It's good. And then I just never stopped.
So do you consider yourself a comedian now?
I consider myself comedian adjacent. Yes. Like I don't tell jokes, I tell stories. Right. But they're funny. So I am booked. I was at the Boston, Women's Comedy Festival. I am booked on comedy shows. Yeah. But I don't do stand-up straight comedy like so many other brilliant women do. Mine are more long-form stories, but they're funny. So comedic storytelling / comedian.
I'm curious, did it take you a while to kind of build up to the Moth? Because the Moth...
No, that was the easiest because I started going to these Moth SLAMs, and it's completely democratic. You put your name in a hat, bucket, they call it, and then somebody wins. And I won my first one that I had gone to in Los Angeles, and I won that Moth SLAM because they're judges and they vote, and it's all very silly because it's a lot of drunk scoring and all that. So it doesn't necessarily mean anything, but it gives you confidence when you win one of those that people enjoyed what you had to say. And then I won another 6 after that. Woo! So I started really doing that a lot. And then once you start doing that in New York, because the Moth is well known, I started getting booked on all sorts of other shows. And before the pandemic, I would be performing at least 2 or 3 nights every week. And touring, I did shows all over the country.
And a very successful agency.
Correct.
What gave you the confidence, since you did have a money issue, your background? What turn did you make?
Well, in the case of becoming part of an agency as big as ours was, I had partners. Yes. And had it not been for my partners, I never would have seen that success. Because certainly financially, I couldn't have pulled it together. They're the ones that were more successful than I was. And I felt like they had pulled me in with them. Mm-hmm. I knew they needed me because there were certain components to run the agency that were important. But honestly, it took me a good 5 or 6 years to actually believe that I was an important part of why we were so successful. Yeah. But I don't think it took that much bravery on my part. I think it was just, I got swept up in the moment, and it was so exciting. And we were successful from the day we opened. So I knew I had made the right decision, but it wasn't me alone. That success was based on having incredibly good partners. And the actors were brilliant. So I got lucky. I really still feel like I got really lucky, even though I have a lot more self-confidence now than I did in 1987 when we opened up that agency. I know a lot of it was good luck.
But do you think the self-confidence now is an accrual of successes?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I think now, I very often, when I have a bad day, I think, you know what? even if I don't accomplish anything else in my life, turning 67 this summer, I've had so much success in so many different areas of my life. My children are healthy and they're lovely adults. I love them as people. I had a great business that was very successful. I've had a great career as a performer.
Yeah.
You know, I don't want to be greedy and expect too much, but I'm very satisfied with all the things that have happened. And I know now, as an older person, that it wasn't by accident. Even though for a long time I thought I just sort of fell into good luck, I know now that I made my own good fortune. The luck came because I earned it. You know, it took a while to get there. I still feel sometimes that I'm just slightly above average, but I know that's not true.
That's not true. What's an example of something you may have had to learn the hard way?
Oh gosh, that's such a good question. I think learning to really trust, particularly men in my case, because of maybe a sort of a reckless dating cycle when I was much younger. And I had to really learn that sometimes someone you're in a relationship with really says what they mean, and absorbing that information and going with that and not trying to find a way to do gotcha or I don't believe you or am I really good enough, but really starting to appreciate that there is somebody out there who is soulfully, truthfully telling you what it is and accepting that and not sabotaging relationships, letting them kind of blossom in their own time. It's a hard lesson.
Hard lesson.
Yeah, it's easy to shoot yourself in the foot.
Why is that so? But
I think it's that fulfilling prophecy, you know, this isn't going to work out, and then you create a situation so it doesn't. You know, it's a very easy thing to do. It's an easy way to get out of something because you're so afraid about what it might lead to, you know, and over time you realize that that's not a great way to live because you are kind of blocking out the possibility for pure joy. You know, if you keep thinking this won't work out, so I'll make it not work out. And I don't recommend that for anybody.
Oh, that's gorgeous. You talked about joy before. What was it that, do you think it's just age and experience that brought you around to joy?
I think it's a lot of things. I think it comes from not worrying so much about paying the Con Ed bill.
Yeah.
I think it comes from being in a settled, happy relationship.
Yeah.
With someone you know you're going to probably go off a cliff, you know, Thelma and Louise style one day when we're really old and we can't take anymore. We have like this image of us like taking acid, you know, like going mushrooms or I don't know, ecstasy, Molly, whatever's the drug of the day, and just driving off a cliff. Like just knowing that things have worked out well enough, my family is in good shape, and it's joyful to know that the day-to-day worries that I had all through my teens, 20s, 30s, 40s, that I don't have those worries anymore. Now it's just about, you know, living each day as best I can and you know, trying to be my best by sometimes doing nothing. Some of my best days are just staring out into space and doing absolutely nothing.
So we have a young audience. What are your life hacks for these kids?
Well, when I was raising my kids when they were younger, and I might be concerned about either alcohol intake or drugs or whatever, and they thought they might be snowing me by mentioning that, oh, no, I'm holding it for a friend, or, oh, I would never do that, or me smoke pot, never. And I remember just saying to them, and I laughed to myself, it's like, if you think that I didn't do everything that you are planning on doing now, you are out of your minds, because I come from a generation where we would have smoked the bark off of a tree if we thought it would get us high. I mean, we would do crazy shit, you know. And I'm a child of I grew up and was dating in the 70s, before herpes, before AIDS. And we were out there and we were really reckless. So, you know, if you think your mother doesn't do all of this stuff or didn't do it then, if she might not do it now, she knows what you're doing. She knows every trick. She knows all of it. She's done it.
So confide in you?
Sorry?
Is it then confide in you, or
what do you mean by confide in you?
That your kids should confide in you?
Oh, yes. Well, yeah, I mean, they don't have to tell me what they're doing. I mean, that's totally fine, because I certainly never told my mother when I started smoking pot. And, you know, I don't necessarily have to tell them, like, who the best dealer is in town or why, you know, when we took Quaaludes in the 80s, we thought that was a great drug. You know, right now I think in my family the drug of choice is Adderall, but you know that wouldn't be for me because I already seem like I'm taking Adderall even though I'm not. But yeah, I mean they should feel comfortable to talk to me about it, but they also don't have to if they don't want to. It's totally fine. They're adults. They make their own choices.
Yes.
I certainly did, and I turned out just fine. I mean, I don't know if I turned out fine, but I'm willing to tell everybody, even with the all the pot I smoked and all the drinking and all the shots of tequila, I turned out fine. I mean, I ate all my vegetables came out of a can, and I think I turned out fine. So
it's true.
I really don't know.
Did you grow up in New York?
I grew up in Queens, New York, in Forest Hills.
So what's your feeling about New York?
I love New York. I mean, I for a while toyed with the idea of moving to LA. I have a daughter who lives in Santa Monica, and I really miss her. But I love New York. New York's our home. My family here. I know the streets of New York. I like the grittiness of New York. I like getting around on the subway. I mean, I like people watching in New York. I mean, one of my favorite pastimes is sitting alone in a restaurant and just eavesdropping over someone else's conversation. I mean, New York is the greatest, you know.
Still?
It's just, there's so much heart in this city.
It's true.
So I love New York.
How old are you now?
I'm 66.
How does it feel to be 66?
It doesn't really feel any different than being 62 or 58 or 49. I guess I just, the only time I feel it is in my bones when it rains out, or the fact that I can't touch my toes anymore. Or my only form of exercise now is going to Bloomingdale's and trying clothes on, because the act of lifting something over my head is what I call Pilates. It's my form of... but outside of that, I feel like my joie de vivre is 30. I mean, that's how I feel. You know, not in a cheesy way. I don't feel like I'm going to the bars at night trying to pick up young men. I'm happily married, but I really do feel I have the vitality that I wish I had when I was in my 30s.
How about that? See, that's what's interesting.
Yeah.
That in a way you feel better now than you did when you were young.
I think part of it's I'm allowing myself to be much more joyful than I did when I was young because of maybe real responsibility, which I did have, which was working 10 to 12 hours a day, raising a family, trying to stay married to my first husband. All of this was like, you know, the way to Sisyphus, like pushing the thing up the hill, you know, that's what it was like. So now my life is charmed because the kids are grown, have a grandbaby. My husband and I have, you know, lots of fun together. He's definitely my trophy husband. And I'm really thrilled to be the trophy bride. And I feel so much more joyful than I did even 20 years ago. And I'm not thinking so much about getting old. I'm thinking much more about grateful that I am this old.